kind enough to take time out of his PTO, if you will, in NYC to join us here on the program. I don't know what it is, man, but I'm hearing out of Cleveland that Shedeur is impressing, Tom, that Shedeur Sanders is 100% in a mix for a starting quarterback job at the Cleveland Browns. I understand it's organized team activity. I understand there's a lot of shorts. There's a lot of, guys that he's throwing on air maybe. But what are you hearing out of Cleveland, Tom?
Well, let's start with this, Rich. If you said what type of quarterback is going to thrive in that environment in OTAs where it's a lot of 7-on-7, there may be some 11-on-11 mixed in, but there's no pass rush, really no pass rush. There's, helmets. You're trying to play within rhythm. It's going to be a guy who's really, really accurate, and Shedeur absolutely is. So it's not a surprise. Now, I know there have been the statistics that were kept in that first OTA practice that was getting sent around. Doesn't sound like those stats were necessarily accurate, nor can you go apples to apples on one OTA practice, particularly when not all practices this time of year are open. But it would not shock me at all if we're talking about this for Mania and open competition with Shedeur Sanders as a part of it as we, get up towards training camp. The real questions are going to be, Rich, if Shedeur or Dylan Gabriel, if two guys who are drafted outside of round one, typically quarterbacks drafted round 2 or later are not in the mix to start. Certainly not round 3 or later, as both these guys are. Would not surprise me if they're at least alive, because you're talking about 40-year-old Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett as the other guys in the room. But let's see where we are as we get into training camp. Let's see how the reps are divvied up. I know Kevin Stefanski, every time he's asked about who's going first and who's with the twos, just keeps saying, don't read into it. Right. It doesn't matter. It will start to matter when you get into training camp, because that's a limited number of reps. You're trying to not just figure out who your quarterback is going to be, but how do you build the rhythm and timing and tempo in the passing game? If it's all Joe Flacco with the ones as we get through the first couple weeks of training camp and into the preseason, then that would probably be a pretty strong sign that they're going to go with what everybody has thought all along would be the option. If suddenly we see that these other quarterbacks are getting opportunities, maybe they're more open-minded than perhaps it might have seemed on paper.
So why are they splitting reps in Tennessee, Tom? Like, what are you hearing from there? I mean, Will Levis even had basically admitted he's not starting for the Tennessee Titans. Quote, he was speaking this week, quote, anyone who's ever been in my situation would agree that it sucks, end quote. What's the point of bringing him along slowly or splitting reps? What do you think?
Well, I think that you look at recent history here, and if you're Brian Callahan and Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi, all the power players in that organization were figuring out the best way to bring along a number one pick. You can look back at recent years and say, okay, how did other teams handle these types of situations? You remember Frank Reich named Bryce Young the starter, I want to say right around this time of year. It was like early June, and he just flat out said, hey, this guy is going to be the starting quarterback. With the Bears, with Caleb Williams, there was no doubt about it. They essentially announced at the draft that, yeah, this guy's going to be starting week 1 for the team. And that's not to say that that's the reason those guys, it's certainly in Bryce's case, may have struggled out of the gate. But there is something to be said for, okay, like let's engender competition throughout the program. Let's set the tone that this is how it's going to be. We're not just going to say that's the guy. And then if Cam Ward falls flat on his face and Will Levis has some type of an epiphany and stops turning the ball over and plays great in camp, that you're going, well, we're going to play a guy who hasn't been as good in practice. You want to send the message that practice matters. Again, we've seen other coaches handle things differently. Not to equate, obviously, Frank and Matt Eberflus did not survive their first season with that number one pick quarterback. I wouldn't say that that's a direct impact on this situation, but certainly you're looking back through, okay, what has succeeded in the past? What types of environments have these guys come into? And they obviously came to the conclusion that the best thing would be to send the message to Cam from go, even though he has tremendous work ethic. He brings people with him. He does all the things right. Still send the message, hey, we're going to start this thing out by you earning that starting job. And every expectation is that, by the time we get into the preseason, that certainly he's going to be that guy.
Okay. So let's just open your book. You tell me what is the big story for you that we're not talking about or should be talked about or you're hearing about, Tom?
Well, I mean, I think we've talked plenty about Aaron Rodgers,
Well,
but
I
it's
mean,
still
what's the point, though? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, right? Because the only way is to get in his head and to figure it out, right? Not to interrupt you, but
no, you're right. But I do think that I know you asked me last week, what's the midnight hour? And there's
right.
not a clear answer on that because Mike Tomlin in particular has just made abundantly clear he's willing to wait. There is going to come a time, though, Rich. There is going to come a time where there's so much time lost. Does it make sense for the Steelers, a blue blood type of an organization that has never kind of been strung along by a player? Certainly not like this, certainly not publicly, much less a 41-year-old quarterback who hasn't played well in 4 years. That time is going to come. The next checkpoint is going to be the mandatory minicamp. That kicks off for the Steelers on June 10th. So you're talking about the next 10 days, we might have an answer. If the answer at that time is, I'm still not telling you what the answer is, that really is going to raise the specter of, are we really going to do this for another 6-7 weeks? And then in turn, the ripple effects on what does that mean for Kirk Cousins, who doesn't have a clear place to go? If we get into training camp and Kirk Cousins is still on the Falcons, does he even want to get traded? Does he want to go someplace else where he doesn't have the reps and doesn't know players or doesn't know the offense? There's the impact on that. And beyond that, there's really not anybody else out there for the Steelers to go and get. I can't think of another situation like this since probably the guy who preceded Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay when Brett Favre took it all the way to August 18th with the Vikings and then showed up and had, a miraculous run. I think that with Aaron Rodgers, the part that we probably aren't talking about enough, Rich, is this. In my mind, this is going to be an A or an F. This is either going to be similar to Favre coming in 2009, where at an advanced age in his career, he puts the whole thing together and just is able to, in this case, goose 17 games plus playoffs out of his body and, hopefully not throw an interception to Tracy Porter at the end of the championship game. But Brett Favre played at an unbelievable level. So that's the A scenario. The F scenario is it looks like it did last year with Aaron Rodgers, and he just doesn't play well. And then the Steelers become a team to watch in the 2026 draft because you could be talking about, now I know Mike Tomlin has a long history of finding ways to get to 9 wins with his teams, but you might have a top 15 type of pick. You got additional ammunition and you can potentially go up and get a quarterback. I think that's how you have to think about this in the big picture from the Steelers. Whether Aaron Rodgers comes or not, 2026 is really going to be the target point for what they do going forward at the quarterback position here. And with Rodgers, unlike Favre, Rich, we haven't seen it. You haven't seen Aaron Rodgers play like Aaron Rodgers really since 2021. 2022 was not his best year in Green Bay. 2023 last 4 snaps before the Achilles injury. 24, he's a 40-year-old guy coming back from an Achilles. It took time. You saw flashes down the stretch, but we also saw some of the worst football that Aaron Rodgers has ever played. So this is either, assuming that Aaron Rodgers comes, which we can feel very strongly about it. Certainly the Steelers believe that he's coming. We'll see when that happens. But when he comes, in my mind, this is either going to work at a really high level or this is going to crash and burn in epic proportions here. And it's going to be up to Aaron Rodgers and all the coaches and players around him who aren't getting that work with him besides DK Metcalf, who's been throwing with him out in California. All these other people now are going to have to microwave this thing and try to make it work with a guy who, is finding time to speak in a variety of different platforms, but not actually call up the Steelers and say what he's doing.
So it is possible he's told Pittsburgh he's coming, right? And that's why they're chilling. I
have been told that he has not affirmatively told the Steelers that he's coming. That certainly all indications, if you just look at it logically, are that he's coming based on his comments about, hey, there's a team that plays in Chicago that I might play for. I'm not playing in New Orleans. He took one visit. He's been throwing with DK Metcalf. He talks all the time with Mike Tomlin. I know he's talked with Arthur Smith. So there's all these signs that he's coming, but he's not affirmatively said, hey, June 9th, book me the ticket. I'm coming in and I'm going to join this team. That has not happened as of this point. And so, yes, they're operating as if the guy is going to be there, but every day that goes by, you just have that sense of just, A, what's the holdup? Why does it have to be like this? And B, is it possible that one of the most unique people in the NFL and in the modern era end up making a very unique U-turn at the end of this thing.
Well, I mean, June 9th, you mentioned that because that's when the mandatory minicamp is.
Right.
And again, he's not under contract, so he doesn't have to go to a place that makes it mandatory unless he just wants to go and be a spectator, right? I mean, so he's not under contract, so it's not mandatory for him until he's under contract. And one would think the only reason why you're mentioning that is that's some of the work that one would think is crucially important, unless, again, the Steelers are quite content giving those reps to Mason Rudolph and the rest of the quarterback room, and Rodgers shows up when training camp begins, and that's when midnight is. Like, that's it. Because it's not like, the Falcons are making Kirk Cousins available, despite him not showing up for a voluntary workout. Tom.
Kirk Cousins can be had. The price tag just has been too high at this point,
right.
And the Steelers have been committed to the idea of Aaron Rodgers. You're right. I mean, last year Aaron Rodgers was in Egypt during the mandatory minicamp, but he had been there through the voluntary OTAs for the bulk of it. That was a little different scenario, but they have a couple of different factors here, Rich. Number one, the Steelers are a team that they don't have, it's not bad attendance, but it's not as high of attendance as you get with certain other teams. We know TJ Watt hasn't been there. This is the time that all the veterans are coming together. This is kind of the launch point that you have into the offseason, which is part of the reason that it became such an issue, at least publicly, as well as to a certain degree behind closed doors, that Aaron wasn't there last year. The second part of it, though, is think about the circus in a extremely quiet time of year, whether that is in June or July or August. There's not a ton going on around minicamp time, end of July to start of training camp, or even through the preseason, right? So whenever Aaron Rodgers shows up, it's going to be maybe not the level of Favre in 2009, but it's going to be a big story, right? The media is going to descend. There's going to be a lot of buzz around it. Every player, every coach is going to be asked questions about it. If I'm the Steelers, if I'm a player on that team, if I'm a coach on that team, if I'm the owner of that team, I want the circus to happen as soon as possible. I want the part about Aaron's coming in and what's he going to say and how's he going to explain. I want that done. I want that dead and buried before we show up to Latrobe for training camp. I don't want that coming out there. I want it to happen as soon as possible. I mean, think about it. You got 6-7 weeks after minicamp to the start of training camp. I think it's about 6 weeks for everything to, sit again, and for all those questions to persist, and for talk shows to lead with the story about what's Aaron Rodgers doing. You already, I mean, going back when Cam Hayward made a comment, what was that, a month, 2 months? I don't know. This has been going on a long time, basically saying like, hey, you want to be a Steeler or you don't. There are people in that locker room who I believe, Rich, would tell you they're already over this entire thing. They just want to know what's going on, and they're sick of hearing about it, and they're sick of asking about it. They don't want to discuss it anymore.
Last thing for you, Tom. We found out, a lot of people think, Vrabel is just a Belichick 2.0, and maybe in this regard, he is, because I think somebody, if Belichick was still in New England, would have to explain to him who Cardi B is, right? And I think Vrabel probably knows who she is already, and if he didn't, he sure does now. Is there anything going on with Diggs and the Patriots we should know about, or just another instance of it's voluntary, he's not there, he's still doing the rehab, he's still doing the work, no big deal? What's going on there, Tom?
Well, I certainly have questions about how on a boat of 12 people, where the guy who paid for the boat ends up on the video that goes viral and becomes an issue. I have a lot of things that are unanswered about that aspect of things. But no, I mean, listen, it's a voluntary part of it. I never totally get why players who are rehabbing injuries do it on their own, because if you suffer a setback or something, that can jeopardize your guarantees and everything else. But Diggs is, he's one of the hardest working practice guys that you're going to have. He goes 100 miles an hour at all times. You can see it on his Instagram and the other videos, of him, what he's doing to rehab. He's pretty far along in his process. They are certainly optimistic that when they get into the regular season that he's going to be ready to roll. There's been no comment from the league. There's really not been a comment from the Patriots outside of Mike Vrabel saying they want everybody making good decisions, which, probably speaks loudly on that front in terms of what he may have not regarded as the greatest decision to be in that position and to have that be on video. But no, I don't get the sense that there's anything there other than this is one of those, ridiculous things that we have a handful of every year. And some teams got to have a conversation about what in the world are you thinking, man?
All right, Tom, thanks for joining. Good Night and Good Luck has no intermission. It just goes straight through.
I heard.
Glenn Ross has an intermission and a very quick first act. Didn't see Sunset Boulevard. Can't give you any heads up there other than the fact that, Norma Desmond is, it's all good though. Okay.
You can just text me the best routes to the restrooms, Rich. That's the only other information I need.
They're all lighted and clearly marked. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it.
Appreciate it. What's up, fellas? Sorry.
What up, though?
Not as cool as when you
That's a new musical saying hi to all the fellas in the studio. Yeah, it's a Rodgers and Hammerstein. Good to see you, Tom.
Good to see you, Rich.
That's Tom Pelissero, everybody. Enjoy New York City. Catch the Rich Eisen Show live weekdays from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern on Roku Sports Channel in the U.S.